Hi everyone, this is Kat from Alley Kat's Quilt Shop, and today we're going to be cutting and piecing block 1 of Getting to Know You. So recently I offered this block of the month quilt in my shop, and I had quite a few people interested and signed up. I was trying to do tutorials at the shop, but I know how busy everyone is, and sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate. So I thought I would go ahead and do the demonstration here so that you can come here at your convenience and see how the blocks are pieced. So I know there are a lot of other people around the country who have signed up or maybe already pieced this quilt, but maybe you haven't started it yet. So if that's the case, join in, follow along with us, and I'm going to be uploading the units each month. So hopefully you'll get some great tips here. So first of all, under block 1, Getting to Know Blue, I want to just very briefly talk about the cutting of our background. So I love this pattern. I think Nancy Rink did a knockout job on organizing all of this cutting and piecing. So hats off to you, Nancy. If you notice, we've got all of our fabrics listed that we received in our packet for block 1. These fabrics, if you want to double check and make sure that the fabrics in your packet are correctly labeled, or maybe they weren't labeled. We labeled ours, but I'm not sure about other shops. So if you flip back to the inside of the front cover, Nancy has given us this beautiful colored fabric chart, and each fabric has a SKU or a manufacturer number that corresponds to each fabric. So if you are looking for your blue blocks, it gives us the number. We can go back here and make sure that we're cutting the correct piece of fabric for that block. When you get down to the background, it says refer to cutting chart on page 3. I love the way she did this because I'm all about being efficient with my time and my resources. So if we flip back to the cutting chart on page 3, oops, we're back one page too many. We've got this wonderful, hopefully you can see this, a wonderful cutting chart here. And it says Seeds Background Fabric Patch Cutting Chart. This chart is only pertinent to your background fabric. Now, many of you already know that there was a choice. There were 3 different background fabrics that you could choose from, but they all were the Seeds print. So the way she's got this chart organized, over here in the left-hand column, it lists each block, block 1 through block 9. Across the top, she has listed different size patches that are used in this quilt. For example, column 1 is a 1 3/4 inch square, column 2 is a 2-inch square, column 3 is 2.5 inch, etc., all the way across. When we get over here to the final 2 columns, we've got BFA and BFB. BFA refers to our block frame A, the shorter frame, and block frame B refers to the longer frame. So here's how you read this. Block 1, run your finger over until you hit a number. This is the number 32. So for block 1, our background fabric, we need some 2-inch squares. We need 32 2-inch squares. How are we going to get that? How are we going to cut that from our huge piece of yardage we got for block 1? You're going to come down here and it says cutting. cut two 2-inch by width of fabric strips. And then we all know that we're going to take those 2 strips and then we're going to turn them and we're going to subcut into 32 2-inch squares. Really efficient way to do this. And then you're going to keep coming across, and then we hit another number over here, number 8. Above it, it says we need 8 4.5-inch squares. How are we going to get that? You're going to go all the way to the bottom of the column, and it says we need to cut 1 4.25 by width of fabric strip. So 1 strip will yield us at least 8. Actually, there'll probably be a few more. So you're going to cut 1 4.5-inch strip and 2 2-inch strips from that very large background fabric piece you got in block 1. When you get over here, we need 8 block frame A and 8 block frame B. If you go to the bottom of the column, it says see cutting block frames above. So now we have another little chart that we need to look at. So if you come up here, it says cutting block frames. And basically what she's saying here is to make this efficient, you might as well and utilize your fabric to its best potential. You might as well cut all of the block frames you're going to need for your entire quilt right now. That way it's done, it's out of the way. And so to do that, the most efficient way to use your fabric is from your background fabric, and this is for everybody, it doesn't matter which background fabric, the first thing you're going to do is cut 2 13-inch by width of fabric strips. Then you're going to turn it and you're going to subcut or recut into 34 2.25 by 13-inch block frame A. So those are the pieces you're going to be cutting from those 2 13-inch strips. Then you're going to cut 2 16-inch by width of fabric strips and subcut or recut into 34 2.25 by 16-inch block frame Bs. Those are the longer of the two. So by doing this, you actually are going to be short 6 block frame A and 6 block frame B. But if we cut another 13-inch strip to get our 6, then we can't use the rest of that strip. So we are going to cut 1 more 16 by width of fabric strip, and we're going to first cut the last 6 block frame Bs, and then we're going to trim that 16-inch strip down to a 13-inch strip and cut the remaining 6 2.25 by 13-inch frame, block frame A's. Once you've done this, you're going to be cutting up a very, very large chunk of your background fabric that you received your first month. But all of your block frames are going to be cut and ready to go. So then all you'll need to do for each month is come over here and you're just going to be cutting the pieces you need from the left side of the chart all the way over to your block frame. You're going to end here. We don't need to look at this part of the chart anymore. Okay? Beautiful, beautiful way of organizing and cutting and having all of that cutting done ahead. I love that. So now on to block 1. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be sewing our B squares together. We're going to be sewing 2 of our background fabric B squares to 2 of our blue squares, B squares. So pretty straightforward. Here is my 4 patch, and in this example I am using the darkest colorway, and two of my blue patches. Now, this is not the seed print, but we had a little problem getting enough of the seed print, so some of us are using one of the other prints, but it's the same color, so it's not gonna change the look of the quilt at all. Once you have your 4 patches sewn together, the only thing I will tell you is you may have to sew a little bit of a scant 1/4 inch, or just check your 1/4 inch, because you want your 4 patch to finish 3.5 inches square. Let me pull this light out here. There we go. So you want it to finish 3.5 inches square. You're going to be pressing the seam allowances to the dark side, which was not done on the sample. I actually am using some units from one of my students, and this happens to be a 12-year-old who is actually making this quilt with us, and she's doing a fabulous job. And so just know that if you're consistent and you press your seams to your blue patch, that's fine. Just be consistent and press them all to the same side. Once your 4 patch is ready, then we're going to attach, and I'm going to orient this the correct way. So our lighter blue patch, I'm going to move the camera here a little bit too. This might help us to see a little bit better. So we're going to take our 4 patch, and we want our lightest B square to be down in this corner. And then we're going to take our D rectangles that we trimmed the corner off of, one corner, and we're going to attach these to our 4 patch. So to do that, we must first attach one of our D rectangles to one of our B patches, or B squares, excuse me. And this is going to be in our darkest blue. So I've just sewn, actually, Allie has sewn her D rectangle to the dark B square, and then we've got another D rectangle. So the first thing we have to do is sew this D rectangle onto our 4 patch, and we're just going to line up that corner and line up our cut edges here, and we're going to sew down this edge. Then I'm going to press it open and come back and sew this on to the other side. So I'm going to do that, and we'll be right back. So here is an almost completed 4 patch point unit. And when I went to sew this and press it, I peeked at the directions again, and I wanted to give Allie a little shout out because Nancy does have us press our seam allowances toward our blue blocks. So great job, Allie. And she is a fabulous little piecer. And so now the next step is we need to add our C unit triangles onto this one end of the unit. Now our C unit triangle, our C triangle, started out as I believe a 3-inch square, and that was cut in half on the diagonal. So we need to trim the ends so that when we get ready to sew it on to this unit, our corners are going to, the corner of our triangle is going to be trimmed in such a way that we're going to be able to line that up beautifully onto this unit that we've been working on. So in order to do that, it's pretty easy. So we'll put these back together. So to do that, you're going to use this easy angle ruler. And if you notice up here on this end, we have a flat edge. And down here we have the point, which is darkened in. We're going to be using the flat edge, and in this case, this ruler is a 6.5 inch half square triangle. So we're basically going to lay our triangle, lay the ruler on the triangle, kind of the same orientation of our triangular ruler. So our 90-degree corner is going to be down in the left-hand corner. And then we're just going to lay the triangle on top of our fabric, and we're going to slide it up until the left edge is flush with our fabric, and then that diagonal edge is flush with our fabric. Now, we're not looking at any of the markings down here on our triangle. We're just looking at the cut edges. And I'm holding this up in the air for you to look at, but that looks pretty good. So let me just draw a line here real quick so that you can see approximately how much we're going to be trimming off of these units. It's a considerable amount, actually. And we'll do that on both ends. So I will just go ahead and trim this with some scissors here instead of taking it back to the cutting table. And then I'll turn around and do the other side. So to do the other side, I'm going to have to flip my ruler over. So I'm looking at the back side so that I can get the ruler to slide up into that position again. And we're going to be looking at having our fabric flush on the right side and having it flush along this diagonal side. And then we're going to draw that line and go ahead and trim that off. All right, so we're going to come back to this unit, and for each one of these units we're going to be placing our triangles. You're going to lay the first one, doesn't matter which side you lay it on, we're going to lay it down. Now don't be alarmed that this point extends beyond the point of our pieced unit. We need it to extend because we need a seam allowance to sew to when we put all these pieces together. And so it's going to hang off here. So let me see if I can just quick sew this. And so I'm just going to drop my foot so that my needle's going to start here. Just going to sew right off on there. And then we'll finger press this out. What I like about this ruler, that easy angle ruler, is that once we get this piece put on, when we're working with angles, this tells you that you've put it on correctly. If you don't have a nice straight line here, then you know something went wrong. And again, down here at our point, you could snip this off straight if you wanted to, but I don't. I'll just leave it on. And what we'll do now is take our next C-unit triangle, and again we're going to start from this edge here. And we're going to lay this here, and look at how beautiful that angle lines up. And then this is the really cool thing about this unit here. Once you get this into position, our edges line up here, and then look what happens over here. Our edges line up on this side too. So it just makes you feel like you have done everything correctly. You're kind of rewarded there for having it line up. And now we know we're going to have enough seam allowance so we don't sew that tip off. I'm going to snip this off now so that it doesn't interfere with my piecing. And we'll go ahead and sew this. The other thing that you always want to watch for is this seam line needs to end right on that point, right on those points. So we're going to just do a little finger press. And here is the bottom edge of our unit. And now we have that beautiful 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here, so that when we put it onto the next piece, we're not going to sew our point off. And that is really pretty. Kind of looks like a house. So we need 4 of these units complete. And then we also need to make our triangle units that go in between. And to do that, we're going to need our E square and 2 of our F background triangles. And we're basically going to line up the corners here, lay it out. We're going to sew this edge, flip it open, press it, and sew this edge and press it. Don't worry about trimming these tips off. Don't trim them off. We don't want to trim those. We want them to hang over. Again, that's going to give us that great 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so that when we piece this block together, we're not going to sew that point off. So let me get my triangle units put together, and then we'll go ahead and assemble our block. So now I've got all of my triangle units made, and we're ready to put everything together. So the pattern tells us to start with our A block. I'm going to try and tip this up a little bit so you can see better. And we're going to start with the A block in the middle. And then we're going to take these cute little house blocks or units that we've made previously. And our triangle units are going to go into the corners here, like so. But we have a little problem here. And I want to stop for a minute and talk about the issue that is happening right now, because some of you may encounter this, and I just want you to know that there's a quick remedy. So our A block, we were told to cut it a specific size. Now, when these units, when our house units are done, they're supposed to be sewn to our A block. But if you look at the edges, the cut edges, you can see that we have a problem. Our house blocks are finishing considerably smaller than our A block. So what are we going to do about that? Well, first of all, our only 2 options are either rip this apart and redo it, or cut this block down. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this block down, and I'm going to tell you why this is the best fix. Remember in the beginning, I said make sure this 4-patch unit measures 3.5 inches square. That is key to this unit. I suspect that these 4 patches did not finish 3.5 inches square, and so once everything was added to it, it is finishing smaller than what we actually need. So because Nancy has us put our block frame A's and B's on our pieced units, we have some wiggle room. And this discrepancy right here is going to fit within our wiggle room that we have when we put the block frames around our block. So even though we're going to trim this block down, I'm going to take 1/4 of an inch off of 2 sides only. And then these units are going to be sewn to this, and it's going to fit. They're going to fit. Then my interior all of my piecing, once I get all the piecing together, it's going to finish a tad bit smaller than what it should have. But because we have those extra large block frames, when we get to the point where we're trimming down those block frames around the outside and squaring our block up, we just are not going to have to trim off as much off of these blocks as we would maybe another set. But is 1/4 of an inch really going to be visible to the eye? No, it's not. And as long as nobody divulges that there was a discrepancy, there's not a person out there that's going to be able to detect that with their eye. So if you get to this point and your units are not big enough, they're smaller than your center square, don't tear them apart and don't try and stretch them to fit, because then your block is not going to lay flat, and that definitely will show up to the eye. So I'm going to go and trim this block down 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to start laying things out and getting them ready to put together, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, here we go. I've got my center unit put together. I have 2 of my 4-patch point units sewn to my center A square with a few little discrepancies here where they line up, but we're going to hide that in the seam allowance. And then I have that 4-patch point unit with 2 of our triangle units attached to either side. And so now I'm going to be pinning the 2 triangles on either side of my center strip. And then the interior of my block 1 will be pieced. But I want to point out one more thing. We had a little problem in the last step with our 4-patch point units matching our center A square. Well, again, because these 4 patches didn't measure exactly 3.5, when I sew my triangle unit on, I have a little discrepancy right here. And now this one lined up nicely. Over here, we've got another jagged edge, and then one not quite so jagged. But what I want to show you and what I want to tell you is this. Don't cut this off. Don't trim this and even it out. And here's why. Let's see if we can. I'm going to back up here. I'm going to move the camera up so I can get a little bit closer to here for you. So if you notice, since this 4-patch was a little bit narrow, it doesn't quite meet the edge, the point of my triangle. And if you look here, the point of this angled piece ends right there. And if I measure from here to the edge of this 4-patch, I'm going to be just a thread or 2 shy of 1/4 of an inch. So if I trim this point off like this, and I go to sew my border frame onto the edge of this pieced block, I'm going to sew off this point because I need a full 1/4 of an inch here. And so when I do that and sew that border on, now I'm going to sew that point off, and I'm going to have a flat side to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the border piece on, and I'm going to line it up with the edge of my triangle, and I'm going to bring it up in a straight line to this top edge. And my seam allowance from here to here is going to be a little narrower on the back side than here. But the discrepancy is going to be in my seam allowance and not in the finished face of my block. So if this happens to you, the fix is line up that border frame with this edge and just have your border frame extending just a little bit beyond this 4 patch area here, and sew your 1/4 of an inch. You're going to have a scant 1/4 of an inch here and a full 1/4 all the way down. And if you're concerned about your seam allowance being so scant here, go back and just sew over it 2 times. Once the quilt is quilted, it'll be secure. But just to get us to that point, if you're more comfortable, go ahead and sew a double seam there. But don't trim that off, because then you're going to lose your point on this unit here. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of this together, and we'll meet back in a minute. So I've got all the pieces together now, and I want to show you one last thing. Pressing is so important with these blocks, especially this block, because we have a lot of bias edges going on here. And I was having a real hard time getting this to press out flat because of those 4 patches. So, you know, just a little teeny thing in the beginning of your block could compound problems later on. So that's why I said with this block, it's real important that you make sure your 4 patches are the correct size before you get started. So if you have an issue trying to get your block to lay flat, this is called blocking, and you can just take it to your ironing board. And if you want to draw a little grid on your board or a square, sometimes they have ironing board covers that actually have different size blocks on them. I just basically eyeballed this. We are not done. We have to put the frames on, so I'm not real concerned, but just eyeballing it, you're going to be able to get it really close. So I just start pinning at the 4 corners, and just kind of, you know, make sure that they look like they're 90 degrees, and then pin north, south, east, west, and then you're going to want to pin in between each one. And then you're going to want to use an iron with a lot of steam, and what I do is I don't even put the iron down. I just steam it really, really well and let it sit. I'm going to try and give you a little side view here, but this baby is sitting really flat now. I'm going to just let this stay on the ironing board here until it completely cools. Once it's cool, then I'm going to unpin, and then I'm going to be ready to put my border frames on. It's really important that if your block is not laying flat, don't put your border frames on until that center block is flat, because no matter what you do after those border frames are on, you will not get it to lie flat. So you really need to block it at this point before you move forward. All right, so I'm going to move over here real quick. Here is the finished block. I've got my border frame A's on, the top and bottom here, my border frame B's, and my block's laying nice and flat, and it's beautiful. So if you want to see how to trim up and square up your block so it's perfect 15¼ inch square, watch my other video on squaring up all of our pieced blocks in this quilt. So I hope you learned a couple of tips today. I hope you're successful in piecing your block 1. I have to say, I think this is probably one of the more difficult blocks because of all the bias in it, but it's not super difficult, but it is one of the more challenging ones, let's put it that way. So you're going to make 4 of these blocks this month. These are going to be the corner blocks that go in the 4 corners of your quilt. So I hope you had fun, and I'll see you back here next time. Until then, happy quilting.